Wherever you are right now, close your eyes. Can you hear anything? If not, try and listen a little closer. Maybe there are cars honking outside. Maybe the floor above you is creaking under the weight of other people's movements. Which tastes linger in your mouth? Have you been chewing gum? Are there still hints of toothpaste on your tongue or remnants of the last meal you ate? What about smell? If you're like me, unless a scent is really strong, you probably don't think much about the smells around you most of the time. But what happens when we do? Maybe you just erased something off a piece of paper and you can still smell the bits of rubber. Or maybe you're catching a whiff of the soap residue still on your hands from the last time you washed them. Go ahead and open your eyes. Look around. What do you see? And I mean really see, not just what do you look past every day that you're always surrounded by. What does the light look like? If you really focus, can you see the dust particles in the air around you?
Yes.
What about physical and emotional sensations? Is the chair you're sitting on hard or soft? Are your clothes itchy? Are you feeling at peace, stressed, or overwhelmed? Taking the time to really engage each of our 5 senses like this is not only a great way to center ourselves and be mindful in any given moment, it's also an important first step in the process of creating strong writing. Today, we're talking about 2 of the most important building blocks in writing: observation and description. Descriptive writing is a skill that comes in handy in almost any writerly task. But in order to write strong descriptions, first we have to start with our own sensory observations. Tapping into a deep observational mode like we just did can help us capture details that will draw readers into our personal perspectives and illuminate essential truths about the ways we experience the world. This is part of why description appears in almost every genre of writing, as is its ability to accomplish many essential writerly tasks, like setting a scene, building character, and bringing readers into a particular moment in time. For a powerful example, let's take a look at a passage from poet and author Ocean Vuong's autobiographical novel, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. He writes, "Take the long way home with me. Take the left on Walnut, where you'll see the Boston market, where I worked for a year when I was 17, after the tobacco farm. Where the evangelical boss, the one with nose pores so large biscuit crumbs from his lunch would get lodged in them, never gave us any breaks. Hungry on a 7-hour shift, I'd lock myself in the broom closet and stuff my mouth with cornbread I snuck in my black standard issue apron." Even with just these few sentences, Vuong creates a world filled with details that are at once unique to his character's perspective, while also feeling real and somehow even vaguely familiar to us as readers, even though we probably haven't shared these exact life experiences. The specifics give us something to grab onto, and something to trigger the thoughts, images, and memories from our own lives that exist on a similar emotional plane. Notice how the language here is simple and straightforward, letting what's described carry the feeling and instruct the readers on what to imagine. We also get an intimate glimpse into the life and mind of this character. From a route home he took at one point in his life, to what he noticed along the way, to the minutiae that he carried with him into the future. There's so much packed into this short description. As writers, this passage also shows us the power of simply observing and recording. Whether writing a narrative or even a literary analysis, describing what we notice can be incredibly useful. Although description might seem like an entirely separate task from something like analysis, the same tools we need to capture the world around us with language also come into play when responding to other people's writing. In both instances, keeping track of what we notice and the thoughts and feelings that various details bring up for us is an important first step. We must slow down our normal processes of living in the world or reading to consume, and really revel in the experiences of sensation and perception. From there, our insights can be grounded in concrete and observable details. It's important to note, however, that grounded insights are not the same thing as objective fact. We often talk about this idea of objectivity in writing as a goal we should aim for, but I'd argue that truly unbiased writing doesn't actually exist. When observing our surroundings and describing them exactly as we perceive them, we're left not with a pure distillation of the world as it is, but rather a record of the details that mattered to us at the time we were writing. Think back to Ocean Vuong's example. For his speaker Little Dog, the Boston Market on Walnut was an indelible landmark, but for somebody else who took that same route every day, they might not even remember that it existed. This doesn't mean that either perspective is more or less reliable or worthy of describing. It simply means that sensation, perception, and memory are intimately personal and unique to each of us. Even in writing where objectivity is assumed, descriptions are inevitably shaped by varied influences, such as our life experiences, and things we may not even be aware of, like implicit biases. When we can recognize this, instead of aiming for an impossible standard, we can create writing that encourages self-reflection in both the reader and the writer. We can also learn to identify writing that claims to be void of subjectivity and engage with it more critically. While some things can be categorized as objective fact, much of what we need language to convey and understand is open to at least some level of interpretation. But whose interpretation of reality gets treated as reliable, factual, and worthy of amplifying, while others are questioned, silenced, and ignored? What's at stake for the dominant culture if currently marginalized voices were to get heard and acknowledged as valid? How does any given description uphold or disrupt the notions that organize our society? These are the types of questions we should be asking ourselves when engaging with descriptive language in the news and media we consume. What gets described and how is bound to be at least in part a reflection of the systems and ideas that already exist. However, language is also incredibly powerful and can shape and impact those same systems and ideas. In her article in The Atlantic, The Headlines That Are Covering Up Police Violence, journalist Sarah J. Jackson writes about the implications of the media's coverage of this summer's Black Lives Matter protests. She writes, "How the news covers activism matters profoundly to a democracy because the media can influence public support or rejection of policies that might solve social ills, such as racism and police brutality. Seemingly small word choices can have large impacts on collective perception, especially when inherently subjective descriptions are treated as objective fact." Jackson continues, "When news stories employ sensational images of property damage, using terms such as riot and the even more sensational mayhem and chaos, researchers have noted a rise in public support for law and order crackdown on protest, rather than support for social policies to address the roots of protest." Think about the difference between using words like uprising or revolution as opposed to riot or mayhem. Although they could all feasibly apply to the same scenario, they each carry very different connotations and value judgments. Both as writers and as critical consumers of language, it's important to remember that descriptions aren't so much a reflection of reality itself as they are a reflection of a particular perspective on reality. Descriptive writing at its best holds an awareness that perception is ultimately fragile and fallible, yet hugely influential in creating our realities. It lives in that liminal space between the universality of the human condition and the singularity of personal perspective. It can make us think, feel, remember, and reflect in powerful ways. But how do we create descriptive writing at its best? Well, there are 3 important things to keep in mind. The first is that the basis for descriptive writing is really slowing down and engaging each of our 5 senses the way we did in the beginning of this video. Whether writing creatively, analytically, journalistically, or even scientifically, sensory observations provide the foundation for strong composition in any genre. The second thing to remember is that while we may never be able to capture our observations exactly or objectively, our personal perspectives are inherently valuable and worth sharing. The simple act of noticing and recording the particulars of our reality as we experience them can allow us to create powerfully resonant writing. As Ocean Vuong's example showed, descriptions don't need to be embellished or exhaustive to be effective, honest, and filled with points of connection for readers to grab onto. The final thing to remember is that we should strive to acknowledge and engage with our own subjectivity instead of attempting to ignore, remove, or deny it. This will not only help us strengthen and develop our writerly voices, it will also make sure we are practiced in the ever-important process of confronting and dismantling biases in ourselves and in the language we consume. So let's put some of these tips into practice. Here are a few quick writing exercises that will help engage our powers of deep observation to create vivid descriptions. The first exercise comes straight from the beginning of the video. Complete a sensory walkthrough of any given space, going through one sense at a time and describing everything you notice. Try not to name the space or tell your readers about it, and really let the details you describe show them around and convey any emotional significance or context. The second exercise takes inspiration from Ocean Vuong. Think of a daily route you've taken at some point in your life. Retrace the route in your mind and describe it with as many details as possible, again, trying to focus on those sensory memories. The third exercise is deceptively simple. Just describe your mother's clothes. I pulled this prompt out of a grab bag in a writing workshop years ago, and I find myself returning to it over and over again anytime I'm feeling stuck or uninspired. I think objects carry so much emotional significance that often gets overlooked, which makes them kind of the perfect jumping off point for resonant descriptions. You can also try this same exercise with another object that belongs to someone important to you. Just remember to focus on sense-based details and to let your relationship to the object and its owner arise naturally. The last exercise is something I like to call the sensory associations game. Start with any sensation, the sound of a mosquito buzzing or the smell of wet grass, for example, and write it down. Then write down everything you associate with that sensation, including thoughts, ideas, images, memories, other sensory details, anything that comes to mind. Try and do this for at least 5 minutes or until you run out of associations. This is a great way to brainstorm for a longer writing assignment and also just a fun way to keep track of the natural connections that already exist within our own minds. While we covered a lot of ground today, I think the most important idea I want to leave you with is that writing descriptively is ultimately about being in touch with ourselves and truly present in any given moment. We already have all the tools we need to do this simply by being living, breathing, sensing humans. If you're enrolled, don't forget to post one of your exercises to this week's discussion board, and if not, maybe leave one in the comments below. See you next time.